How urgent are you with your life today? How urgent are you with the assignment that you have been given? And if you've not been given any assignment in life, how urgent are you with the life itself that you have been given in totality, to look for the assignment and so on and so forth? The degree of our urgency determines the degree of our productivity in our lives. Every time you see someone who lacks urgency in them, definitely that person will be someone who has less or no productivity. There will be people who will be procrastinating or postponing things, or saying I'll do it when the environment is right and so on and so forth. But the opposite is true. The guy who has urgency in their lives, they will find a way even when the conducive environment is not there. They will not go by feelings, they will go by will, they will go by design, and they will find a way where there seems to be none, because there is a virtue of urgency deep inside of their hearts. Let's talk about that today. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Life Signatures podcast with Lawrence Namale. Lawrence is a life coach, author, and keynote speaker who loves to tackle different topics on purpose, productivity, and resilience. His mission in life is to awaken all your boundless possibilities available in you. Life Signatures podcast is dedicated to bring to reality every single person who knows that deep down in their gut, there's got to be more to life than this. And now, here is your host, Lawrence Namale.
When you watch adventure movies, and sometimes some of these adventure movies are actually based on true life stories, there's these scenes that they normally paint of the leader of the army who stands in the front row and he issues an urgent rallying call and a speech. And by the way, there is a movie, I think it's called The King's Speech. It is based on a true life story of a particular king in the UK, I think in London, who had a serious speech impairment. And he hired some kind of coach who tried to coach him on how to speak. It's a brilliant movie. Actually, I'm going to look for it and watch it again. A brilliant movie. And now, the country was facing a serious war at that moment in time, and they were waiting for the king to speak. And he took his time. He went through the coaching and so on and so forth. It was so embarrassing, it was uncomfortable, it was nerve-wracking, but at the end of the day he was able to deliver the speech. And when he stood at that podium and people were listening by their radios to the king's speech, it galvanized a whole nation. But let me tell you something that was coming out of that speech. It is nothing else but a spirit of urgency. Urgency is going to galvanize people. If it's not going to galvanize, if you're a leader, by the way, if you're a leader of anything, a leader in the home, a leader in the business area, a leader at work, a leader, whatever place, if you're a leader and you lack urgency, it's going to mirror into the people that you are leading. But if you are a leader and there is a spirit of urgency in you, and what is the spirit of urgency? You might be asking. It is a spirit that is coupled with passion for doing what matters and making sure that it is delivered come rain or shine. That is urgency. All right? So if, for example, your child is for some reason wayward and so on, and you're a mama, and we've seen very many stories of that nature, urgency comes into your spirit and you do everything necessary to make sure that you rectify the situation. I'm told of a story of a guy who's a Christian, and the child just came back, and the child was, behaving in a funny way and basically rude and indisciplined and so on and so forth. Just slams the door in his room, and slams the door on the parents, and the spirit of urgency came upon the dad, and the dad started praying at the door of this boy and weeping, praying and pleading with God that God will save this guy. And that's exactly what happened. The guy opened the door and he changed. From that moment on, he was never the same. The spirit of urgency delivered that change. If you are a leader and you lack the spirit of urgency, something is wrong with your team and you're not going to deliver a lot. But if you're a leader and they see urgency in you, urgency related to productivity, urgency, and this urgency is not just you're using people, stepping on their toes and stepping on their heads, and no, it is urgency based on pure love, wholesome love. And you want productivity, you want growth, you want people to be better than they were. Urgency that communicates to people that, listen, you are better than this. If you are a leader and you don't have that kind of an urgency, what happens is that it mirrors into your team and they also become mediocre, so to speak. And all along in history, we've seen very many types of people in religion, in sports, in business, in governance, in every kind of niche you can talk about, every name you can drop that made a difference. You talk about Mother Teresa, there was urgency in her spirit. And by the way, you can even flip the coin and you go to the dark side. It cuts both ways. Villains have urgency with them. Talk about Hitler. There was urgency in his pursuits. Talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. There was urgency. Talk about Nero in history. There was urgency. Talk about Nebuchadnezzar. There was urgency in them. Talk about all these people we read in history who made things to move. You will never fail to find the spirit of urgency operating inside of them. And it is our rallying call today in this episode to think about that and to start reevaluating our lives and looking at those guys as a mirror and asking ourselves, where is urgency in the things that I'm doing in my life? Where can people see the urgency? What is the object of my urgency? What is the object of my pursuit? Am I a student? Where is the urgency in my life as a student? Am I a mama? Am I a dad? Where is the urgency in raising up my children? Where is the urgency if I am a pastor? And this one is, it strikes a chord with me. If you're a pastor, a man of God, a woman of God, where is the urgency to minister to the sheep? To feed the people royally, to hear from God and feed people fresh bread, to be selfless and sacrificing and resolute, and being a leader who sees what people don't see. Where is the urgency in there? Whoever it is you are, whatever things that you're doing, ask yourself that question today. Where is the urgency in my life? Yesterday I read for you The Fellowship of the Unashamed by an unknown Zimbabwean pastor. Great stuff. There's another guy called Billy Sunday who said this. He said, listen, I'm against sin. I'll kick it as long as I've got a foot. I'll fight it as long as I've got a fist. I'll bite it as long as I've got a head. And I'll bite it as long as I have a tooth. And when I'm old, fistless, toothless, and footless, I'll gum it till I go home to glory, and it goes home to perdition. There was urgency in what he was saying, even if you don't believe in this spiritual stuff and religious stuff. But you cannot negate the fact that urgency moves things. Urgency was in Billy Sunday's message. Listen to what Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said, by the way, he said very many things, and every time you listen to any one of his speeches, even the speech he was telling the kids, he was speaking to a commencement address, and he was talking to kids about mission, vision, and knowing themselves and purpose and so on. There was urgency always in his voice. This is what he said. He said, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. It is in this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is not a time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. There was urgency personified. Urgency in what he was passionate about. Urgency in what mattered to him. And urgency in terms of timing. The timing We can be late. We are faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We're confronted with the fierce urgency of now. There's such a thing as being late, and therefore there is no room for complacency and apathy. There's time for vigorous and positive action. Martin Luther King Jr. So pause and think about all those things I'm talking about in terms of urgency. I have made a case that every high-class performer in every niche, in history, in the contemporary world, in the present world, every high-class performer, you can never ever distance them or separate them from the spirit of urgency in whatever it is that they are pursuing. Never. All of them had the virtue of urgency operating inside of their lives. So it is incumbent upon us, as I'm coming to a close of this episode, it's incumbent upon us to find out how urgent we are, where our urgency in our pursuits is found. And let me tell you something. You cannot tell me that you have urgency in resting and being comfortable and being cozy. That one doesn't work. Comfort and coziness should be a result of productivity. You go to the opposite end. For example, if you are having a pendulum, one end there is comfort and productivity, but you don't get to that end until you swing to the other end of productivity. So one end there is comfort and coziness, but the other end there is productivity and urgency. So you swing you lift yourself up on a high level of urgency and productivity, and then when you let the pendulum go, it goes to the extreme end to the degree of your swinging on the other end of urgency and productivity. To the other end is going to go to coziness and comfort. So ask yourself, in my productivity, in the things that I'm doing to be a better me, to grow me, to excavate my potential and my capacity, to do the things that I was called to do and the things I'm supposed to do, how urgent am I in that realm? How urgent am I in that department? If I am not urgent in that department, then it is time. Martin Luther King Jr. said that there is such a thing as being too late. And let me tell you something. It is true not just for Martin Luther King Jr. and his pursuit for civil rights. It is true for individual lives that there is such a thing as being late. That is, if we are not going to be urgent with our lives. And we know it. Like I've said in the previous episodes, we only know this, or we always know this, when we are old and they cannot do anything to rectify the situation. I mean, you've been living for 70 years and you are not urgent with what matters to you in life, right? Like you find a 40-year-old trying to create a career in rapping, being a rapper or something like that. 40-year-old, 50-year-old. I mean, you've not been urgent with your life. You've been mediocre with your life all along. There is such a thing as being too late as an individual. There's such a thing as being too late as a human race. There's such a thing as being too late as a family. There's such a thing as being too late as an organization. There's such a thing as being too late as a religion, if urgency is not applied. So let us think about all those things, and let us start, looking at ourselves and starting to cultivate and desire and document the kind of urgency that we have in our lives and start living by it. That every single week we do an introspection and ask ourselves, was I urgent this week? What was the object of my urgency this week? And once you start doing this, you start to realize that you're becoming accountable to yourself. And the more you become accountable to yourself, the more you are increasing your productivity. And I think the more you increase your productivity, the more you increase fun, and the more you increase coziness and comfort that you're looking for. So the equation becomes balanced. So as you can see, without there being urgency in your life or in my life, what happens is that we're living a life that is unbalanced, just looking at one end of the spectrum and not the other. Well, we are going to conclude this series on urgency in the episode tomorrow, and I hope it's going to be a glorious one, just like the other ones have been. But it's pricked my attention seriously to think about this and to continue inculcating the spirit of urgency in my life. Well, until tomorrow, where we do finish this up, I wish you all the best. May you be as urgent as you can be. There is no limit to it. Bye-bye. A special shout out to my mentor Jeffrey Howard of Visionary Business University, found at mastermindmentor.com, who has graciously provided me with the soundtrack and the introductory track to this podcast. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to Life Signatures Radio. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Life Signatures Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or visit our website at lifesignatures.libsyn.com. Life Signatures Radio, fresh, clean, and inspiring.